We are so fortunate today to be joined by Joe Weisentowski. I've known Joe from the documentary editing and digital humanities world for a few years now, and we were meeting with him about something unrelated when he sent us these experiments that he had been conducting on some documents that I know he's been working with for years. We got really excited about this, and we're delighted that he offered to or he said yes when we asked if he would share his work with the rest of you here. So for a bio, Joe is the digital history advisor at the Office of the Historian at the Foreign Service Institute at the U.S. State Department. He has his PhD in modern Chinese history from Harvard and has been with the Office of the Historian since 2007. He led the project to digitize the Foreign Records of the United States, the FRUS series, which is a 160-year-old documentary edition of 550 volumes, 300,000 documents. Getting that digitized, I'll digress a little bit. I've seen his presentations on it. The workflow that he and his team built for correcting OCR, digitization, doing annotations and things is one of the most sophisticated I've ever seen, all based on GitHub, very highly technical, just fascinating stuff. So you can see these online at the Office of the Historian's public website, history.state.gov. It's also contributed to open data repositories of github.com/history@state. He's also co-author of X Query for Humanists with my pal Clay Anderson. Which is definitely worth checking out if you're working with XML a lot. So based on that, let's let in the last few stragglers. And Joe, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you so much, Ben and Sarah. Thank you for the invitation and the kind words. Advance here. Okay. Before I get started, I have a kind of mandatory disclaimer that I must read that the opinions I will be sharing today are not those of the U.S. State Department or the U.S. government. They're my own. I'll give you a sneak peek at one of the cards to let you decide if you are interested in hearing more. Then I'll step back and provide some context about the project. And then I will get into the experiments we've been doing most recently with the project. Here is that sneak peek at one sample consular card. This is about 6 by 9 inches originally. We have a collection of about 6,500 of these cards. On the face of them, they're tabular, but if you spend a little time looking at them, you'll see there's more than just a table going on here. And there's more variation than you even see here. So I'll give a little bit of context about the Office of the Historian and our digital initiatives. The Office of the Historian at the Foreign Service Institute at the U.S. Department of State produces the Foreign Relations of the United States series, which is the official documentary history of U.S. foreign relations. It's mandated by Congress. There's a law that requires that our office publish documents no more than 30 years after the events they describe. And we've been doing this since 1861, 160 odd years, and we've produced the number of documents and volumes that Ben shared earlier. Besides the Foreign Relations series, we have several other unique and valuable publications on the history of U.S. diplomacy and the institutional history of the State Department itself. Besides publishing, we perform research internally for the State Department, and we teach incoming Foreign Service officers at the Foreign Service Institute. Our website, history.state.gov, offers all of those publications for free. They are fully accessible. They are searchable and downloadable in ebook formats and we also offer the raw data underlying the publications as well as the source code for the website on GitHub as well. I mentioned the Foreign Relations series, as well as a few other of our core publications. The Principal Officers and Chiefs of Mission is a database of US ambassadors and the principal leaders here in DC who run the State Department. That database goes back to 1789, the founding of the State Department. We also maintain a database of foreign travels of the Secretary and the President. A database of visits by foreign leaders and heads of state. We have essays on the history of US relations with every country in the world, even countries that are no longer on the map. And we have our newest publication is an administrative timeline of the Department of State. It's a prose kind of encyclopedia of sorts, really a timeline of short entries covering major administrative events in the State Department. So these are kind of core foundational data sets if you're doing research in US foreign relations or the history of the State Department. This is a screenshot of our public website, history.state.gov. I'd invite everybody to take a look and to try to search for any topic you're interested in. Underlying the website and our digital initiatives are a set of standards and technologies that we built on. We did not want to reinvent the wheel. We wanted to build on the best that the digital humanities, digital libraries, digital archives community had been working so hard on. So we leveraged the archival guidelines for digitization from the Library of Congress, National Archives, and the University of Wisconsin Digital Collection Center, who I'd just like to call out here because they scanned the first 100 years of the Foreign Relations series as their first faculty voted mass digitization effort. They selected the Foreign Relations series as their faculty's choice for a mass digitization effort. And they kindly provided us with the scans of all of those volumes. That really jump-started our digitization effort. And then all we had to do was scan the more recent volumes or adapt those to the new format. And in return, we provided them with the scans of our newer documents, so they had the opportunity to expand their collection. And we also provided them with the full, fully digitized texts of the documents too. So in terms of the specific standards for encoding text, we use the TEI initiative guidelines for encoding all of our book and article length resources. Our public website uses, as you might imagine, HTML and CSS for the online presentation. We also offer downloads in EPUB and MOBI format for use by e-readers. We generate those EPUBs and MOBIs from the TEI master file, just like we generate the HTML from the master TEI. Software-wise, underlying all of these resources, we use open source software, ExistDB and TEI Publisher, which really excel at the storage and search of TEI and all XML encoded documents. So that's what you are using and talking to directly when you come to our website. And as I mentioned before, we release our data and source code on github.com/history@state. Here is the landing page of our History at State organization at GitHub, where you can see all of the individual collections of data and source code. And this is when I'm going to jump over from the slides to browser tabs. And I will be taking a chance that the internet gods will be with us today and that our crowd will not be struck by any terrible outages. So now you should be seeing my browser window instead of the slides. And I'm on the landing page for the repository for the project I'll be talking about today, which is the Consular Cards project. As the README shows, we have a set of 6,500 index cards that the State Department used internally to track the staff of US consular and diplomatic posts abroad. These cards started being recorded in the late 19th century. They were retroactively produced. In other words, they reached back into the archival records to make a complete list of consular and diplomatic officials going back to 1789. And then the cards continued to be used and kept current through about 1960. Our office became the steward of those cards when they were no longer maintained, when the department moved to other record keeping methods. And we used them from the 60s through the last decade, and really currently, we use our scans of these to answer a whole host of questions that we have and that people write into us at our public mailbox for, with questions about their father or grandfather or grandparents' service at the State Department, like the card I showed you before. In about 2010 or 2012, we thought we should really scan these, both for preservation purposes. It would allow, by scanning the cards, we could retire them to the National Archives, who could be the good long-term steward of the paper records. And we thought this data set is a real gold mine for us, and maybe we could find some way to make them useful digitally. Having the images was great, but because of the nature of the handwritten text on those cards, all of our experiments with OCR at the time and until recently have really yielded no good results. So we dreamed of some kind of crowdsourced transcription project, perhaps. We tried to model the data because it's tabular, but not fully tabular. There are these remarks that are outside the tables. There's text written on the back of these. So there's kind of a challenging set of records to model in terms of capturing the information there. There was one earlier effort at digitizing these cards, or a selection of them, in the mid-1980s. The Foreign Service Institute, actually, before we joined the Foreign Institute, produced a study that was published and is still a very useful record about the history of the Foreign Service based on these cards. And there was some like limited digitization of certain columns to make possible reports of who served at what post across the cards. Unfortunately, the data for that project was lost, and we have not been able to build on that. We have some printouts of records produced from that database, but it was partial. Only some posts were included, and there were various kind of criteria, selection criteria. So it's unfortunate we couldn't build on that, but this is where we are. We had these, we sent the cards off to a vendor to have them scanned at high resolution, and we asked them, since they were not subject matter experts or documentary editors, archivists, librarians, we asked them to capture a limited bit of metadata about each card. And I'll just show you the data as you would see it on GitHub. Now, you're not meant to really look at it in this form, but this is a TEI file. Here's the amount of information we have really about each card. The label of the card, the order of the card, because we have a front and back face, the color of the card, whether it was a diplomatic post or consular post. They're very values for that status, I believe, the earliest year on the card, and the sequence of the card of all the 6,000 cards as scanned. So this is what we captured initially, and this is the data that we have had in the application we created, which is on that GitHub site. As the README says, the application runs in exist, so anybody could download exist, build the application package and install it, and you would see what I see here. So we built a basic application to browse the cards as we were able to scan them and have them roughly indexed. Here's that Acapulco card that I showed earlier. And we display all of that metadata that we have, that the scanning vendor gave us. And we just try to present this information in a basic logical form that is browsable, but it's not searchable. You know, all we could search really is these labels. So I could search for, say, Berlin, see all of the faces, all of the cards that had Berlin in the label somewhere. We have some, because we captured the starting year, we were able to show some rough chronologies of the period, but this hasn't, you can see there's a lot of variation here. Berlin is treated differently when it was a part of Prussia than later. And it's just a lot of messiness in this data, but this is what we had until recently. And here's where I'll get into the discussion of our experiments with AI transcription. A few months ago, we started to experiment with using AI chatbot tools to see if they could do any better job than the traditional OCR tools. And we started to find kind of frustratingly promising but inconsistent results. And they were alluring, like sometimes we could get really good results, other times we couldn't get results. And but we were intrigued enough to continue experimenting. So I'll give you an example of sort of a basic prompt here with ChatGPT and the same image that we were talking about earlier. I have to drag the image. Okay, here's really where we're testing the gods. All right, my fallback is going to be, I'll go to the previous version where I asked ChatGPT to transcribe the text and the image. We're having some network problems here, but this is what it did. ChatGPT recognized the tabular nature of the data on this image. Actually, it's not the Acapulco image, but it's a Denmark card. But what it missed was that beneath those two rows, there was actually a non-tabular set of information. We had these two rows that it transcribed pretty well, but then there's this remark here: office ordered closed September 7th, 1920. So this is a break out of the tabular data structure, and now we have a standalone kind of prose, what TI people would call usually an anonymous block. And ChatGPT just omitted that. And I think it's probably, if it was recognizing the tabular structure, it was definitely thrown off by this example. We could try the same thing in Claude, and I think I will try to retrieve the previous chat to avoid the problem we had before. Again, please transcribe the text in this image. It described it and then sort of tried to display the text in an interesting format, not tabular, but and then it says intriguingly, right? Alluringly, at the bottom of the card, there is a note, office ordered closed. So it sees that and makes a note of that. So there's some really good text recognition capability here. It's even able to deal with the tabular structure. Even though we're not seeing a table here, it's reproducing the column headings. I'll just do Google Gemini. This was a really underwhelming response, but I would get this sort of result from the others from time to time too. There's a dose of randomness introduced into these chatbot large language models. And so from attempt to attempt, you'll get different results. And naturally, though, for anybody who has experimented with large language models, you will understand the importance of prompt design and using a clear prompt to tell the large language model what you're interested in. So the variation that we're seeing here is partly explained by the vague prompt I've given it. I haven't told it exactly what I want. Do I really want you to capture the tabular structure? What do you do in the case of something that's outside of that tabular structure? Should you try to transcribe everything you see, even in like some random word that's outside of a box, or omit those? So as I started to refine these prompts and continue to try the same refined prompt with the various large language model chatbots to try to get more consistent results of the kind I was expecting. And there were, I'll show the full prompt. It's quite long, but I'll also show that for each of these services, I've been showing the standard kind of consumer facing version of the interface. Each of them has a corresponding kind of more advanced interface, which they usually call their dashboard or their portal. And if you access the same large language model through this dashboard or portal, you'll start to see additional options that give you more control over the response. So before I mentioned that there is a degree of randomness in the large language models, the consumer-facing interface doesn't let you control that. But it is actually a numerical value. It's called temperature. And these more advanced interfaces let you drag a slider from 0 to 1 or 0 to 2, depending on the interface. And you can dial back that degree of randomness. And I found that by eliminating, like turning the randomness to 0, turning the temperature to 0, I could at least start to get more consistent results. Here's that temperature slider. Drag it to 0. There are other toggles here, like which model do you want to use? Many of the large language models actually offer, larger, smarter models or smaller, faster models. This also gives you access to safety settings, which again is not in the consumer facing one, but is in this more advanced developer facing one. You can say what you would expect the large language model to do in the case it detects hate speech, dangerous content in what you're asking it to look at and in its response. I have in some cases for the prompts I've asked for about this or other documents, the large language models with the default settings or the consumer facing version will sometimes just refuse to provide an answer because they think that what it's being asked to do is it involves some of these categories. So you can hit a wall if you were using the consumer facing one, but in the developer facing dashboard, you could disable some of these or limit them. And I have found that has allowed me to get past its kind of overeager safety checks, which I appreciate that they're there, but it's nice to have a toggle in the case that it's a misunderstanding your intent or the nature of the sources. And there are even more knobs and levers here. I don't understand all of them or haven't had to really use them all. But I started by using these, I get more consistent results. And now I'll show you the full prompt and the results that I started to get out of it. So here is the full prompt. Many prompt engineering, resources from the companies as well as expert users emphasize the using your prompt to first define the persona that the large language model is supposed to assume. You're a teacher, a kindergarten teacher, trying to explain dark matter or something like that, right? Versus you're a college professor trying to explain the same topic. It will follow or try to follow your description of the persona to give you different quality results. Or different levels of detail, or different tone, that sort of thing. So I started out by describing the sort of persona of the professional background of the person and the task that they're working on. I described, as I would say probably to like a new employee working on this, an assistant of some kind who we would maybe bring in to work on a project, like the project description, what we know about and what we want them to do. Prompt engineering best practices also emphasize providing full examples, representative examples of what you'd like the results to appear as. So with many of the large language models, they use sort of a XML style tagging to set off example text from other types of segments of the prompt. So I use that to show how I would like the results to appear. I used XML comments for inline hints about how the various tags should be used. And as you might see if you are a user of TEI text, I call this a TEI inspired XML format. So you might expect to see head here or down here, table, row. I truncated those and I'll explain that a little bit more later, but as we get through the prompt. So this is a short example that shows the mixture of like a table heading. I'm sorry, this is prose only. The next example shows the real mix, like the really nasty mix of tabular and non-tabular. I want to get I want the large language model to return the tabular data using a TEI inspired format for capturing tables that wraps the whole table in an outer table element. Each row is the next level. And and then each cell in the table is its own element too. Past the table, I return to just P for prose or those anonymous blocks. Then after giving the large language model examples, I provided additional rules that these came out of interactively, iteratively working on the model. If large language models famously hallucinate, so I tried to tell it, please don't fabricate. I don't know, honestly, I think large language models all of the response. You should really treat all large language models as hallucinating everything. And only some of the responses might happen to be true or based in the data you're giving it. But it doesn't hurt to tell it to try. I think here the key thing is capture the text faithfully. Don't alter it if you think there's a mistake there. Capture all the text. Don't omit any text. Here, this is more wishful thinking. I still see cases where the large language model will omit text, even though it's there. But this is my intent. And this is the same kind of instructions, again, I would give to an assistant, a human working on this. Please don't omit any text. That's important for our project. We really want to capture the text as it is, not shoehorn this into some tabular structure when there's information that's not tabular. I also was interested and found sometimes the large language model will follow this rule. If it's unsure whether the transcription is correct, wrap the word in a U element. This is borrowed from TEI's unclear element. And I have a few more here where this was inspired by results where sometimes the first row would contain, say, 8 cells, and then the second row from the large language model somehow only included 3. But why did it omit the others, even if they were empty? So I was trying to get it to be more consistent. Another feature in these cards is the use of ditto marks or quotation marks in cells that sort of say this is the same as above. And I have found that if I didn't tell it explicitly, please capture those, it would omit those. But I started to get better results from this kind of prompt. And again, I wanted one of the large language model to capture even empty cells with a C element. And here are the initial results. So this is the first 20 pages that I gave to, in this case, Gemini. Here's the image up top, and I'll try to size this so you can still see that at least the first row. First of all, it captures the label on the card as a label. Then the tabular structure begins. It gets all of the tiny text that are column headings pretty well. And the first row, it really nails, except that the date of appointment cell here actually belongs over in remarks. So there's some table alignment problems. For us, that's not a deal breaker though, because we anticipate we will have to review all of the transcriptions, and we're not going to publish this as is, or rely on the data as it's here. This is the purpose of this, is to give us a good first draft, a usable first draft, rather than starting from nothing. And beyond the table structure, Gemini did a very nice job capturing that non-tabular anonymous block here, office ordered closed. The next card was the reverse of that first card. And this is very small, faint, red colored text that this Gemini got completely perfect. Henry Dam arrived at Aarhus September 30th, 1919, and assumed charge during illness of Consul Kell. I'll just scroll through a few more to give you a sense of this. I think maybe I'll go down to Acapulco because I showed that on the first card. Yeah, that's the one. We were especially hopeful that the tool could capture the names of the people. That was much more important to us than the dates per se, because for this first draft, we wanted to be able to search for people's names, and we wanted to be able to find those people, and then we could hone in on the original and check those other columns, but we really wanted to find the person's name. It did a very good job at that. On the basis of this initial experiment of 20 documents, 20 card images, I decided to continue using Gemini and its developer tool to process as many of the rest as I could. To do that, I used a feature of many of these developer-facing toolbars, which is once you have a prompt that's working, check out this button here, Get Code. Let me insert my prompt, and so we see that reflected in the code. I'll just do a short one, like please transcribe the text in this image, so we can see that in the code. And I'll insert media because I don't think I showed this exactly. You also get more information in this interface, like the number of tokens that it detects in your prompt, so that the text of your prompt counts as tokens, but also the image counts as tokens. Every large language model has a limit in the number of tokens that it can accept in a prompt, and a limit in the number of tokens it can output. Luckily, these cards fit within the output token limit. I didn't have any cards where the output was truncated, but depending on your sources, you may well have sources with more words than the large language model is able to output. Here is a sort of another example of like okay transcription, but if I gave it the full prompt, you would see more. But back to the get code. Gemini provides 4 versions of the code, and by here the code, what I mean is a way to speak to the large language model instead of through the web page, speak to it through a programming language or through a terminal command line. And that's what I went with. I used their curl option. So by kind of following these steps, and I know the text is small, I could copy this command and paste it into my command line. You see here, please transcribe the text in this image. And if I copied this, pasted it into my terminal, I would get the results right in my terminal. And I used that to write a small script using exist. As you can tell, having written a book about xquery, that's the language of choice for me. And it was able to adapt this curl example to exist and xquery, and have that script iterate through all 6,500 cards. As I mentioned, there are images on the back, so really we're talking about 8,800 or so images, and one at a time. I would submit the prompt together with the encoded image here and these settings. I can tweak all those other settings that I was tweaking in the interface. They're all available here. And then I stored the results in exist, and added them to the Consular Cards project. So in GitHub, I have a branch that's not yet merged. So the data in this repository now, in this branch, is the old information about each card. I kept that in the TEI header. And now in the body of the TEI, I have the raw results from Gemini for that same card that we were talking about. And it structured this exactly as I wanted to in the prompt. And maybe I will leave the question of the exact XML that I asked it for and that I produced here to the Q&A if there's interest in that, but I could talk about that decision. Suffice it to say that what I asked the large language model for got me better results than asking for standard TEI. So having stored the data, I was able to update the Consular Cards application. We'll go back to, say, Acapulco. And next to this card, I now have a corresponding extension of the table where the transcription can be seen. So side by side, we still focus on the original image as the kind of core record here, but you can consult the transcription. And here, this is especially impressive to me that it captured the heading of the card up here as Acapulco, Mexico. It also was able to capture the new inline separate title for the second portion of this document, as well as the parenthetical or paragraph anonymous block before that. So again, Acapulco de Juarez is the new label for the new table, but there are a couple of non-label blocks above and below. And this is the result of, of just the prompt that I showed you earlier. So we can display that. Also, because we have the text in TEI in exist, we can search for phrases like, well, let's try this one. May take a little bit because there are quite a few examples of this. I searched for the phrase died because sometimes, well, pretty routinely, as you can tell from having 884 card faces, the remarks include descriptions when an official died at post, died en route to post, and so on. So there's no index of people officials who died at post. That information is all buried in individual remarks. There's no way, we had no way before this of searching for that kind of information, short of going through card by card. We're building up sort of research project specific lists. So having a basic searchable transcription gives us access to that. I know that there may be more, that the transcription is full of errors and not totally reliable, but as a first draft that Gemini was able to give us over the course of 48 hours running on the background in my computer, it's a pretty good first start. In the process of working through this, I also noticed another phenomenon in the cards, which is the use, and you see here in red. Let me zoom in a little bit more. We have a IIIF server that lets us zoom in on these. Next to some names of officials, there were these parenthetical remarks in red. Here, colored, which indicates the race of the official. There's no column for race of all officials. Somebody at some point made a note of this attribute of the officials who are here. Here's another case of died at Cape, kind of outside the table. So there's a lot of information in here that's tricky to fit into a table, but Now being able to search for, having observed that the cards contain this designation of colored, um, we can now search across the data set. And again, with all the caveats that this may not be all of them, we can find those people. And in fact, my colleague who is researching the history of African Americans in the State Department found names in this report of Black Americans who were officials who she did not know about from her past research. So this is really, as I said in the title, kind of helping us unlock this this source. And with all the caveats about this needing further review, we were very excited that we could achieve this through a first pass at transcribing the cards, capturing the structure in a pretty nuanced way. And we, looking ahead, there are, I think, a few tasks before us. First of all, Gemini failed to transcribe 466 of the 8,600 images. It's about 5%. It just gave unusable results. And I think it got into sort of a loop. And the loop caused it to hit the token limit. And my script did not recognize the result as valid XML. And so I effectively got no results there. I haven't had the time to explore that further. And I'd like to work with the Google team to try to address that if possible. 5% isn't bad. We can always go and work on 466 images if need be. That's a lot better than 100%. As for the review, we are lucky to have a virtual student foreign service internship program. And we have some promising interns who will be working for us remotely this fall. And initially we had been planning to ask these interns to help us transcribe the cards, at least transcribe the names of people on the cards before we had this solution. Now we'll allow them to actually build on the transcription, review the transcription, and do research on the content. So they're able to start on a much more useful basis for them to be useful researchers and editors of this information. So we're at a very early stage of this. I hope this information is useful for people considering whether these technologies could be appropriate for their use case. I really think from document type to document type, you'll get different results. I'm not claiming you'll get the same results from your documents, whether they're tabular or not. Your mileage may vary. My mention of these various providers isn't an endorsement of them, but having tried the 3 providers I showed, I did find that Gemini gave me the best results in capturing the tabular structure. The others were more uneven at giving me back the tabular and mixed content structure of the documents. But I suspect that may change. These models are getting updated and released, week by week. And just because Gemini worked well for this project, and I wrote this script and ran it in early June. If I ran it today, who knows what we would see, hopefully improvement, but we might get other better results from some of the other models. So we're in an early phase of this project. I think the tools are also maturing and at an early stage there. but I think it's promising, and I thank Ben and Sarah for the opportunity to share this information with you, and I'd be happy to take questions for the remaining time.
Yeah, let's open it up to questions. We already have one from Susan Lugo asking, how do you gather or solicit feedback from your users on the database? Do you think the searchable database will expand the user universe? And are you thinking about linking the names to other info like images or documents and foreign records of the US? Yeah, and how many staff you have working? Lots of questions there.
Okay, great questions. So we, to date, the users of this application are only internal. So we don't publish this application on history.state.gov. And the reason is that it hasn't been up to our standards for accessibility. So before we had the transcription, there was no way to search or see a screen reader friendly view of the cards. And it's been an important priority to make those cards accessible, but other priorities have taken precedence until now. So with this transcription, now we could perhaps make this application accessible to or available to the public. I still would like to do a more review of the transcription and at least do a random sample to convince ourselves that the transcription is a responsible one. And that said, the source code for the application and the data is publicly accessible. So people, kind of advanced researchers or people who are really interested, can access this data in this state. So we're kind of on the fence, you might say. We want to make the data available to people who could use it, but in terms of making this a publicly accessible application on our website, it's not there yet. That is definitely a goal, though. To get to that point, we will need an interface to edit the data. So I'd love to have a web-based interface for our student interns to edit and flag things and ask questions and discuss amongst themselves. Such an interface, would need to be able to display the tabular structure of the information. So I'm still searching for whether there are tools that could handle that mixed content tabular nature of the information and display it in a user-friendly way. In the meantime, we're using Oxygen for maintaining the data. And I need that is really a next step, is to, between now and the fall semester, I have to come up with a solution for these interns. Again, they could use the information as it is, but to effectively capture their feedback and edit and improve the transcription, we'll need a tool. So that is a really good question. And once we have reviewed the transcriptions and aligned all the content with their appropriate rows, I think then is a really good time to start linking this information to other resources on our website. The Foreign Relations series, the database of ambassadors and other principal officers, and other monographs and articles where people might be mentioned, or information about the posts or about the cities where these posts are. A dream would be to build a database of all US diplomatic and consular posts abroad. There is no such a thing at the moment, but this would be a really foundational resource for that. As for the number of people in my office, we have about 55 people on staff who are working on the Foreign Relations series, on case studies, oral histories, internal research. I think were there others in that?
And there are more questions and not a lot of time. So let's see. We have a question. Jennifer Grunenberg asks, where are the consular card images stored that you fed to Gemini?
So when I was interacting with Gemini, I uploaded to help my script run as fast as possible. I pre-uploaded all of the images in their original TIFF 600 DPI format, to Google's cloud storage, which is basically a cloud-based storage system, similar to Amazon's S3, and it's in here somewhere, storage. But basically, I uploaded the folder of all 8,000 images, and then I was able to reference those in my script instead of having to upload each image as part of the script. That did speed up the processing. The images in the application that I have here are stored in S3, and the zoomable feature is made possible by Cantaloupe, which is a IIIF image server. So it reads from S3, the original high quality image, and then creates tiles zoomed in at the appropriate zoom level for the client.
Let's
I'll
see.
just click around if you read the questions.
There's another question. Somebody direct messaged me asking, were the 466 failed extractions, did you consider sending them to a different large language model?
Or just trying them again? I'm actually kind of curious if you think if trying them again would have made a difference.
Yeah, so I did try it again at the time. Like I reran the script on the set of failed ones, and I got the same results. So something about those images, I think there were some common features that seemed to trigger it. Forget exactly what they were, but certainly trying these with a different large language model would be a very good idea. And another experiment I plan to try is IIIF does let you request segments of images. And one brief experiment I did was to just request the segment of the image here that's the name column, and basically hand off that name column only to, in the case I did was Claude. Now, Claude might have been not as good at capturing the tabular structure, but maybe it would be better at reading the handwriting in some cases. So I could, one approach would be, if we really care about names, if the images are consistent enough that the coordinates for where that column is are consistent, I could do a run where I just get the name column from all the cards that have name columns, or something analogous. So if we wanted to do a targeted extraction or targeted enrichment of some bit of information that, let's say these ditto columns Gemini wasn't doing a good job on, but ChatGPT might capture better. We could do that. But if it doesn't capture the tabular structure, I would do worry that if there's a blank name here, that I wouldn't be able to align that with the other tabular information. So, but that is a possibility to, absolutely try the same model, try other models, try, other approaches and other strategies.
There's a lot of other questions and quite a few comments that are probably worth scanning, but let's see. We shared the link to the public GitHub in the chat if you want that.
Really quick one. How do you pronounce FRUS?
In the office, we say frus, but it is common to hear people outside the office saying frus. They're all okay. As somebody with a last name that's pretty difficult to pronounce, I forgive attempts at pronunciation.
We're beyond time, but let's ask one last question. Did you ever look into fine-tuning or training a small number of ideal prompt and response pairs? Did you explore that and rule it out, or is that something that you haven't tried?
I did not explore fine tuning or any rigorous prompt testing framework. I think that would be a really good idea. And the idea would be to say we have a few variations of a prompt that get us some decent results. We could send each of those versions to all of the large language models, for 10 images or 10 sort of a representative sample set, and then analyze the result. And I think that would be a really good scientific approach to this. I took a more informal throwing it at the wall to see what would stick approach. But I think a more rigorous approach I would definitely recommend that. If you have those capabilities, and maybe there will be tools that help facilitate that. As for, I did not mention one other tool, which it's been on my radar screen for many years, but as potentially applicable to this, which is Transcribus, or eScriptorium, which is kind of an open source offering similar to Transcribus. And that is explicitly a machine learning training tool for training specific machine learning models on particular handwriting styles. And there are pre-trained models, but where you would really go to Transcribus is if you had somebody's diary and there were hundreds of pages that would be very laborious to transcribe. You could train a Transcribus model on your figure's handwriting. And for this, in this case, there is generally, I think you've been seeing the same handwriting in many of the images I've shown, but there are other hands that are present. So it's not consistently one name, one handwriting style. And in my attempts to use Transcribus, even when it gave us well, I never attempted to train a model, so I can't comment on that ability. But in some samples that I did, it does a very good job of capturing the text where it appears on the image, in kind of its graphical coordinates, but the structure of the text on the page is entirely left to you. So the tabular structure or the paragraph structure, besides the words on the page and their location, seemed to me that would require additional development. So that might be a really good tool for some projects, but for this one, I didn't invest the time to really see whether that would be appropriate.
So I think there's kind of two comments there. One is the Reed Co-op folks who make Transcribus are definitely looking at and working on field-based models. So I think it's worth looking at. If you have those projects, it's an interesting thing to check in on because this stuff is changing so fast. We also have our new AI assist working from the page will interface with Transcribus for you and manage that process. So that's kind of forthcoming. We have it, 12 institutions are kind of doing trial work with it now, and then we'll have it generally available. So my plug for hosting this.
Thank you. That's one of those emerging areas that I want to continue to follow.
This last question might be a good place to close, which is
oh, we should make sure the GitHub repo question.
Oh yes, okay. Let's jump to that one first.
Yeah. Is the repo for this public? Because we couldn't find it. We can go look at history. It stayed on GitHub, and we don't see the Consular Cards.
Really? Oh darn! It is private.
Look, you're gonna fix it right now, right?
Okay. I'll fix it right.
Thank you.
Especially after emphasizing that so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing or remembering where I have to go for this. Oh, I think it's probably down here.
The danger zone or something. Yes, repository visibility.
Yeah.
There.
Visibility. Thank you.
Okay, and then we can drop that link
Okay.
into
Hooray. Okay, so a great wrap-up question, that do you have forthcoming case studies or other publications on your use of AI on Fruist records? And I'm gonna expand that to just ask how people can keep up with your work on this, and your research. Yeah, so how can we follow more amazing things that Joe does?
Oh, thank you. For this project, I'm not the lead researcher on the research that we're going to be doing with these cards. That'll be my colleague Aaron Mars. But I think you'll see progress on this project through the repository. I'd love to produce a write-up of the history of this, a proper introduction to the resource, to the history of its creation, maintenance, past digitization efforts, the present effort, and I'd love to see this have a proper home on our website as integrated with our other publications and data sets. So I would you'll see the ongoing work on this at this repository or at the other repositories. Just in general, if you want to get in touch with me, I am Joe Wiz, Joewiz, on GitHub and Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm also reachable by email, joewiz@gmail. And I don't want to spell out my whole state.gov account because it does involve my last name. So, but if you want to reach out, feel free to, and we'll continue the discussion there.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your work. This is really innovative. It's something that, as you said, we've seen lots of HTR that does coordinates and sort of transcription, and this kind of really complex document. You're combining transcription and markup was brand new to me, and I think it opens up a lot of possibilities. So we really appreciate you sharing this with us.
Thank you so much for hosting. Thanks everybody for your questions. And I hope that any questions that were answered, if I can get a transcript of the chat room, which I haven't been seeing, I'll try to follow up on those.
We'll definitely pass it on. There are people offering help.
Wonderful.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you too.